Welcome, class. This is the Understanding the Analysis and Model of a School District assignment. I encourage you to listen to this presentation because it contains pointers and tips about how to complete this important assignment. First of all of the instructions that I'm going to review are available under the Assignments tab of the course eMoodle. This is called Fieldwork Part 2, Analysis and Model of a School District. It's a key assessment, and it's worth 30% of your grade. The due date may be found in the course calendar under the Course Documents tab. So what are you going to do in this? In this fieldwork assignment, you will first research a school district, both on the internet and by interviewing two professionals that work to identify and or serve gifted students. So this could be a school district you're already familiar with, perhaps it's your own district, or one you're not familiar with, but it must be one that has a definition of gifted students, identifies and serves them. It can be from any state. After you complete your research, that is, after you complete your internet and your interview, your two interviews, you're going to suggest ways to improve the district's model, effectively creating a revised model for identification and service. That's a tall order, so let's get started. So you'll see that the instructions are broken down into steps. If you just follow them one by one, you should get to the end and have a successful project. First, you need to locate a district that identifies and serves gifted students. Get started with this now, because even though the assignment's not due for a number of weeks, it's going to take you a while to complete all the steps. You could look on the internet. You could ask your friends, your colleagues, do they know a district? You could go to the NAGC website that has some information. But whatever you do, you need to locate that district early. Then you're going to identify two individuals who work with and either to identify or serve gifted students. So who are these individuals? Well, ideally, you're going to select from the list that's here. Could be a current administrator, for example, a principal, an assistant principal, or even at the district level, a superintendent or an assistant superintendent. It could be the gifted program coordinator. It could be a gifted teacher or even a regular classroom teacher who works to identify gifted students. It could be the school psychologist or school counselor. Anyone other than these individuals should be, you should gain permission from the instructor prior to proceeding. So after you've identified these individuals, you're going to write them or call them and ask them if you can interview them for about an hour each. Now, the interviews probably won't take that long, but you should request an hour just to see in case the conversation goes over. They'll be probably pleased if it's less than an hour. You may conduct these interviews in person, on Zoom or another virtual platform, or even over the phone. So before you conduct your interviews, it's important to finish your internet research, and there's some things you want to identify about the district. First of all, the state, obviously, and then find the definition of gifted and talented in the state. And so I would just Google, if you're doing New York State, Google New York State gifted identification. If you're doing Connecticut, state of Connecticut gifted identification or the gifted definition. Of course, you found your school district. Find the district's website. And again, the way you do this is just Google the name of the district and website. So Martin County School District, for example. In the website, you should be able to find the number of students that the school district serves. So write that number down. How many schools are at each level? How many elementary schools are there, middle or junior high, and high schools? And about how many students are in each school. So you want to get a feeling for the size of the district. What are the demographics of the district? So what does that mean? So, for example, what are the percentages of different ethnicities served by the district? What is the percentage of students who receive free and reduced lunch? Others might be, what is the percentage of ELL students served? So find that. That information is usually available on the school district's website. Does the school district provide a website for its gifted and talented program? Some of these districts do and some don't. See what you can find. If they do, explore that website. That'll tell you a lot about the gifted program. So then you're going to conduct your interviews after you do your internet research. Take notes, take lots of notes during your interviews with your two individuals. The questions that you are to ask have been given to you. So you can see A through M here. What's your name? What's your position? Background, get their degree. What's their role in identifying or serving gifted and talented students? What students does your district consider to be gifted? So pay attention when they answer this because it should match what their district's identification is. What are the steps in the process of identifying gifted students? Who nominates them? Is there universal screening? They may not know what that means, so you may have to explain that it means screening every student for gifted services in some way. When may students enter the program? Is there just one entry point, or can they enter every grade or multiple points? How are gifted students or students assessed? What instruments are used and who uses them? How are students selected for the program? How are they placed? What consideration does your district make for underrepresented students? So we're going to learn later that these are students, for example, ELLs, certain minority students such as Hispanics, African American students, um, children of poverty, disadvantaged students. What considerations are made for them? How does your district communicate this whole process to parents? Do they send letters home, for example, in the parents' native language? Which letters and when do they send those letters home? Um, what services does your district offer to gifted students at different grade levels? So are they different at the elementary school than high school? They probably are. How does the district make the decision about which services to offer to specific students? So is there a range of options? And how do they make the decisions about which students get which option? Is there an exit process for students who should not be or do not wish to remain in the gifted program? Sometimes placements don't work out. What provisions does the district have for this? Is there an appeals process? So if, for example, a student is turned down for the gifted program, can a parent or a student appeal that? Ask them if they feel the process is fair to students. Why or why not? Ask them if there's anything else they would like to add. You'd be surprised what comes up. And add any other questions you might wish to ask. Now you're going to ask these questions of both individuals. You'll notice that some of the questions and answers will be the same and they'll be redundant. And it'll be a little frustrating for you, but I encourage you to ask the same questions of each individual. Part of what you're trying to do is uncover their understanding and views of the same process. So, for example, person one might say one thing and person two might say another thing, and then you've uncovered either a misunderstanding about how the process should work or a different understanding. Don't challenge their ideas if you believe them to be incorrect. Your role is just to get more information. And so you're allowed to ask probing questions or follow-up questions like, can you explain to me how that might work? But don't say, oh no, I don't think you should do that, or that's not my understanding of how this works. Instead, listen, ask for lots of questions, and take notes on what they say. You review the outline for the paper that I'm going to discuss in a minute so you'll feel prepared to write it. So the fifth step is about analyzing. That is comparing the results of your internet research and the interviews with what you have learned in class. So I've put here 5 guiding questions for you to think about and write about. Were the views of the 2 interviews similar or different in terms of their understanding of the definition of gifted for the district, the overall process, and the fairness of the process? Letter B, do you feel that the golden rule of identification is followed? That is, are definition, identification procedures, and programs and services aligned? Why or why not? Letter C, are the instruments and steps used in the identification process appropriate? Are they efficient? Do they cast an appropriate net for services and as wide a net as possible? Why or why not? Letter D, review the standards 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 covered in Module 2. Which evidence-based outcomes are most closely adhered to? Which need improvement? And finally, letter E, how would you change district practices if you could? So this is going to be where you start to think about how you're going to develop your new model. Finally, you're going to write your paper. You've done all the research, you've done the thinking, and you're going to use the following outline. Make sure you use appropriate APA style, headings, and formatting. Include citations and references. When you have completed your paper, submit it to the link in the Assignments tab on the eClass course site. This paper may not be revised, unlike many of the papers in the course, or submitted late. So here's the outline. You have an introduction. You'll provide some district information that's here. You'll provide the state's definition of gifted, the district's definition of gifted if you can find it, and the link, if there is one, to the school district or the school district website for gifted. Then you're going to describe your interviews. For the first interview, you're going to step through those questions in a narrative form. So instead of just saying A and then listing the name, you're going to say, on such and such a date, I interviewed Jane Doe. She is the school psychologist at such and such. Her degree is, so you're going to write it in a narrative format. You're going to do exactly the same for the second interview. And then you're going to write your analysis that we talked about. You're going to come up with a revised model. What would you improve or change, and provide the rationale. And this is most likely where most of your citations would be in your analysis section, and also in your revised model section. Finally, you're going to write a reflection. A reflection is different than a conclusion because it reflects on learning. So a few questions that you might consider are, what did you learn about gifted identification for this assignment? What did you already know? What surprised you? You could also think about, what did you have trouble with? How would you change the assignment if you could? And then finally, a conclusion, which is a little summary, and your references for any citation that you had above. You need to provide a reference in APA format. These assignments will be graded with a rubric, and the rubric is listed at the bottom of the instructions, and you can see the first part of it here. You can just step through each part, and what I tell my students is, have the rubric out and in front of you as you're writing the assignment, and you can score your own assignment as you're writing it. So did you provide a very complete description of the district? Did you provide the definition of gifted and talented? Did you provide information from the interviews, from your analysis? Did you provide an in-depth revised model? Did you provide a thoughtful reflection and not just a conclusion? Did you provide references? And spelling and grammar and APA were all correct. So that's this assignment. I encourage you to get started by identifying a school district as soon as possible, and please feel free to email the instructor with any questions.